At 4 in the morning, when the world still sleeps, history was being written in the silent dust of the Sahel. A convoy of trucks crept along the darkened border roads of Burkina Faso. 57 trucks, disguised as aid, yet heavy with secrets. What they carried was not food, not medicine, not hope. No, my brothers and sisters, what they carried was death itself. But in that midnight hour, a watchful eye did not close. A border patrol noticed the shadow moving, and from that moment, destiny began to shift. For on the 16th of August, 2025, President Ibrahim Traoré stood firm, commanding his soldiers to rise, to intercept, to uncover a plot greater than any the nation had faced. This was no ordinary news story. This was a revelation, a warning, a trumpet sounding in the night. And today, we must walk together through this tale of danger, of betrayal, of courage, and of awakening. Before we journey deeper, let me ask you, subscribe to this channel, share this message, and stay with us until the end. For what you are about to hear is not just Ibrahim Traoré news, it is the living heartbeat of Africa crying out to the world. The night was heavy with silence. The people of Burkina Faso slept under the stars, unaware that their very future was rolling down a hidden road. 57 trucks moving slowly, tires pressing into the dust, engines humming like whispers of war. At the Canary border, where the land touches Togo, the unexpected happened. Captain Moussa Kabore, commander of the border patrol, felt something was not right. Convoys do not pass at such an hour. Humanitarian aid does not sneak through back roads. Why then were these trucks moving in the darkness? He raised his radio. His voice was calm, but his spirit trembled with certainty. Alert the command. Something is moving here tonight. Within moments, the message traveled upward. The president himself, Ibrahim Traoré, was informed. This was not a leader who hesitated. This was a leader forged in the fire of struggle, a man who understood that shadows often conceal daggers. Without delay, he summoned General Ibrahim Zerbo of the Special Forces. His order was firm but cautious. Intercept the convoy. Be careful. This may be more than smuggling. And so, under the cloak of night, the army moved. Helicopters rose, drones watched from above, and elite soldiers lay in wait along the narrow path. The air was thick, every heartbeat like a drum of destiny. At 4 o'clock, the ambush snapped shut. The road was blocked. The headlights of 57 trucks froze in the dark, and a chaos erupted. Some drivers tried to escape, others froze in fear, but within minutes, all were captured. When the first truck was opened, silence fell. Soldiers expected grain, rice, medicine perhaps. Instead, their eyes met the cold glint of steel. Beneath sacks of aid lay rifles, crates of ammunition, rocket launchers, grenades, an arsenal fit not for farmers, but for armies. Every truck told the same story. Every sack was a lie. Captain Kabore whispered into his radio, his words heavy with disbelief. "Mr. President, you will not believe this. These trucks, they are packed with weapons, enough to arm a nation." The numbers spoke louder than any speech. 25,000 AK-47s, 10,000 M16s, 13 million rounds of ammunition, 70,000 grenades, 2,500 rocket launchers, 400 anti-aircraft missiles, 50 tons of explosives. The silence broke with one thought that swept through the command room. This is not smuggling. This is war waiting to be born. President Traoré's face was firm. His voice cut through the air. Secure everything, do not lose a single bullet, and make those drivers talk. Someone is planning to drown Burkina Faso in blood. The drivers were questioned. Most claimed ignorance. We were told it was machinery, parts for farms, goods for trade. But fear breaks the silence, and soon the truth begins to leak. Routes had been chosen carefully, each truck dispatched from a different location, only converging near the border. This was no coincidence. This was choreography, a dance of deceit, planned to the smallest detail. Daylight revealed what the night had hidden. The captured convoy stretched like a wounded serpent across the land, every truck a reminder of how close Burkina Faso had come to disaster. The questions spread like wildfire. Who had the power, the money, the intent to send such weapons here? This was no black market trick. The arsenal's worth exceeded $700 million. Too vast for petty smugglers, too deliberate for mere criminals. The fingerprints of greater powers were all over it. And so, brothers and sisters, we stand at the threshold of revelation. The weapons had been seized, the drivers captured, the nation momentarily safe. But safety was fragile, for behind those guns stood hands, unseen, minds calculating, and pockets deep. The president called his council. The defense minister trembled as he spoke. With this firepower, you could invade an entire country. The interior minister added, with a heavy heart, had these weapons reached their destination, chaos would already reign in Burkina Faso. Yes, the trucks were captured. Yes, the weapons were laid bare. But the question remained, haunting every thought: who sent them and for what purpose? And my friends, this is where the story deepens. For the answer, when it came, was darker than anyone dared imagine. The drivers had spoken, and soon the name of the first conspirator would echo through the chambers of power. A name that would unravel a plot far larger than a smuggling ring, a plot that threatened not only Burkina Faso, but the very heart of Africa itself. The first driver broke. His name was Marc-Antoine Zongo, and his hands trembled as if the weight of the weapons still rested on his shoulders. He whispered between gasps, "We were told. Machinery, farm parts. We did not know." But as investigators pressed, a darker truth surfaced. These were not men of war, merely pawns. Lured into a game they did not understand. The real players were still hidden. Then, on the second day, the tide shifted. Investigators uncovered serial numbers scratched into steel, faint but not erased. Forensic teams traced them back to Libya's civil war, to the battlefields of Yemen, to brand new factories in Europe. Some rifles had never been fired. The cost, when calculated, stunned the nation: $700 million. Who could fund such an operation? Who would dare attempt to flood a landlocked country with enough firepower to topple governments? The answer came from a man once considered untouchable. François Bongo, a wealthy businessman known for his influence and charm. Under the pressure of interrogation, his resolve cracked like dry clay. His words fell like thunder. "This is not about weapons alone. This is a plan. It has a name. Operation Restored Democracy." The room froze. Operation Restored Democracy. A phrase wrapped in irony, for beneath its noble sound was treachery most foul. Bongo revealed what few had suspected. Foreign powers were involved. Meetings had been held in Accra, instructions whispered in Abidjan, blessings received in Paris, and the green light given in Washington. The plan was simple yet deadly. Unleash terror to create fear, stir chaos among the people, then, with the help of traitors inside the army, launch a coup d'etat. A new government would rise, a puppet regime obedient to foreign masters. The confession shook the very pillars of the presidency. Ministers gasped. Generals exchanged dark glances. President Ibrahim Traoré leaned forward, his eyes burning. Which foreign powers? Bongo hesitated, sweat streaming down his face, but at last, trembling, he spoke. Western powers, diplomats, corporations, NGOs. They promised us support. They promised us protection. They promised us money. The betrayal was complete. Not only were former ministers and retired generals involved, but also foreign envoys, businessmen, and even international organizations sworn to neutrality. The news reached the people, and the streets buzzed with disbelief and anger. Could it be true that their own leaders, men once trusted, had sold their homeland for 30 pieces of silver? Mothers wept, elders shook their heads, and the youth clenched their fists. In the capital, Ouagadougou, the president convened an emergency council. The defense minister's voice cracked. With this firepower, an entire region could burn. The interior minister added, if these weapons had reached the warehouses, our cities would already be in flames. But the storm was only beginning. An international reaction arrived like lightning. From the west came outrage, but not against the smugglers. No, the outrage was aimed at the arrests. Western governments demanded the release of those captured. They threatened sanctions, economic punishment, and isolation. They called the accusations baseless, the confessions fabricated. Yet from the east and the south, voices rose in support. Russia declared, Traoré has the right to defend his nation. China pledged to supply equipment for border security. Turkey spoke firmly, Africa's stability is our stability. Iran thundered against imperialism, and Venezuela's Maduro proclaimed Traoré a hero of anti-colonial struggle. The press, too, swarmed like bees around honey. CNN demanded answers. BBC pressed for names. Al Jazeera asked about Africa's security. Each question was a spark. But Traoré stood unshaken. This is not just an attack on Burkina Faso, he said. This is an attack on Africa. They destabilized Libya. They shattered Syria. They bled Yemen. And now they want us to join the ruins. But we are awake. We are united. We will not kneel. And then, before the eyes of his people and the world, Traoré revealed the arsenal. The towering mountain of guns, rockets, and explosives seized from the trucks. Behind him, the weapons gleamed like a monument to treachery, a testimony to what might have been. Cameras flashed, reporters gasped. For the first time, the world could see with its own eyes the size of the storm that had been averted. The people erupted. Some cheered, others cried. Elders lifted their hands to the sky in gratitude. The nation felt both shock and pride. Shock at the scale of the betrayal. Pride that their leader had acted in time. Yet beneath the celebration, one truth lingered. This was only the beginning. For if this was phase 1, what was phase 2? If 57 trucks were stopped, how many more convoys were still hidden on African roads? The truth was still unfolding, and whispers spread of something even greater, a conspiracy that reached beyond Burkina Faso, stretching its hands across the Sahel, threatening to engulf an entire continent in fire. By the third dawn after the seizure, Ouagadougou trembled, not from fear, but from the thunder of boots and the roar of engines. Operation Storm had begun. 23 locations were raided simultaneously, the city gripped in the iron hand of justice. Warehouses, once thought silent, now rang with the cries of the guilty. Soldiers broke down doors, and the darkness gave up its secrets. 17 warehouses, filled not with grain, but with weapons. More guns, more explosives, more grenades. A hidden army, waiting to be unleashed. The arrests shocked the nation. Former ministers, retired generals, powerful businessmen, men whose names once commanded respect, were dragged into the light. Some protested their innocence, others lowered their heads in shame. And among them were faces even more unsettling, foreign nationals, men carrying diplomatic passports from France, Britain, America, Israel. But these were no diplomats. These were ghosts of the empire, masked as envoys, now unmasked as conspirators. The prosecutor laid it bare. Treason, weapons trafficking, conspiracy to overthrow the state. The courtroom swelled with citizens demanding justice. Mothers, widows, veterans, youth, they filled the benches, their voices rising as one. No mercy for traitors. And still, the investigation went deeper. Laptops and phones seized from the suspects revealed a truth colder than steel. The plot was not confined to Burkina Faso. No, brothers and sisters, the conspiracy was regional, continental, global. Documents showed plans for Mali, for Niger, for Guinea. Each blueprint is the same. Terror, chaos, coup, and the installation of puppet rulers loyal not to Africa, but to foreign masters. The scale of the financing was staggering. $1 billion set aside to break the Sahel. President Ibrahim Traoré called a second press conference. His tone was fire. His words sharpened like blades. The masks are off. Those who dream of recolonizing Africa should listen carefully. We are the grandchildren of Thomas Sankara, and we will not kneel. He held up papers for the cameras, drafts of a new government already written by conspirators. Names of ministers, policies, budgets, as if the land already lay conquered. The arrogance was breathtaking. They divided Burkina Faso before even touching its soil. And then came the declaration that turned weapons into symbols. In front of his people, President Traoré announced, "We will melt these weapons. We will forge them into school bells, into plows, into hospitals. What was meant for our destruction will become the foundation of our future." That promise came alive in Independence Square. Before tens of thousands, the first rifle was cast into fire, its metal melting, its shape vanishing. From the molten stream, a bell was forged, a school bell. And as the crowd roared, the president raised it high. Every morning, when our children hear this bell, they will not hear the sound of death. They will hear the sound of peace. The square erupted. Old men wept, women ululated, the youth shouted his name. Traoré, Traoré! For in that moment, hope was reborn. But let us not be deceived. Victory carries weight. The West responded with fury. Demands for the release of their captured nationals grew louder. Threats of sanctions filled the air. Yet Traoré did not flinch. His words were steady. Having a diplomatic passport does not give you the right to commit crimes on our soil. As the world argued, Africa listened. Leaders in Mali, Niger, and Guinea watched closely, their own struggles mirrored in the conspiracy exposed. Across the continent, whispers rose, if Burkina Faso can resist, so can we. And so a shift was felt, not just in one nation, but in the spirit of a people long pressed down. From the ashes of betrayal, a new defiance was born. The weapons had been seized, the traitors unmasked, the people awakened, but the storm was not over. Sanctions loomed, alliances shifted, and enemies in the shadows still plotted. What do you think, my friends? Will Burkina Faso's victory inspire Africa to stand as one, or will foreign powers tighten their grip to crush this awakening? Beyond the borders of Burkina Faso, the revelation struck like an earthquake. In Washington, in Paris, in London, the halls of power whispered with unease. Official statements were swift, sharp, and indignant. They demanded the release of their citizens. They questioned the legitimacy of the confessions. They accused the government of Ouagadougou of staging a spectacle. And behind those words, veiled threats emerged. Sanctions, aid withdrawal, economic isolation. Western media echoed the tune. CNN asked if Traoré's government was manufacturing fear. The BBC spoke of political theatre. Le Monde suggested the revelations were exaggerated to strengthen his grip on power. Yet, for the people of Burkina Faso, the proof lay not in speculation, but in the mountains of weapons now displayed in their capital. But the West was not the only voice. From Moscow came firm support. Every nation has the right to defend itself. Beijing went further, offering to donate border security technology and equipment. Ankara declared, "Africa's stability is our stability." Tehran thundered against imperialism, while Caracas called Traoré a new symbol of resistance. The African Union, often hesitant, found itself stirred by the sight of weapons turned into school bells. Its envoy declared, "This is more than Burkina Faso's fight. This is Africa's fight." In Bamako, Niamey, Conakry, leaders expressed solidarity, knowing that the conspiracy stretched toward their own thrones. The division of the world was clear. The West accused, threatened, doubted. The East and South encouraged, defended, applauded. And in between stood Africa, rising from centuries of shadows, daring to claim its destiny. Yet the question remains, will the global balance of power shift under the weight of these revelations, or will the pressure of sanctions and diplomacy bend Burkina Faso's resolve? History teaches us this: empires do not yield their grip easily, and freedom, once declared, must be defended not once, but always. The eyes of the world now turn to the future. Can Burkina Faso transform victory into a lasting path, or will the storm of foreign pressure descend again with greater force? When the dust began to settle, when the shouting of arrests and the noise of press conferences faded, a deeper question arose: what comes next? For a victory is not only in the seizing of weapons, it is in the shaping of tomorrow. President Ibrahim Traoré stood once more before his people, not as a man who merely stopped a plot, but as a leader pointing toward a new horizon. His words carried both gravity and vision. These weapons will not remain as they were. We will melt them down. We will turn rifles into plows, grenades into irrigation canals, missiles into the foundations of schools. And so, the promise was set in motion. Some of the arsenal would be transformed into scrap, the proceeds funding 100 schools and 50 health clinics. Other weapons would be reforged to modernize the national army, ensuring that Burkina Faso would never again be caught unprepared. The rest would be destroyed permanently, so that their deadly power would vanish from the earth. The symbolism was not lost on the people. In Independence Square, before tens of thousands, a rifle was cast into the furnace, and from the molten metal, a school bell was forged. Traoré lifted it high. Every time this bell rings, it shall not call soldiers to battle, but children to learning. Not death, but life. The crowd erupted. In that moment, the nation understood that its leader was not only defending them from war, but teaching them how to dream again. Yet the road ahead is not without thorns. Foreign pressure will mount. Sanctions may tighten. Hidden enemies may regroup. But the seed of unity planted in these days cannot be uprooted so easily. For when a people have seen with their own eyes the weapons meant to enslave them, they will not easily forget. This is the crossroads of Burkina Faso. One path leads to submission, to bending under the weight of foreign powers. The other leads to resilience, to an Africa writing its own story. And in these fiery days, the people have chosen to rise. The world watches. Some with anger, some with admiration, some with fear. But one truth stands clear. Burkina Faso has declared itself awake, and an awakened people cannot be lulled back to sleep. The weapons have been seized, the bells have been forged, but the struggle is far from over. For if this is only the beginning of Africa's awakening, then what storms still wait on the horizon? And so, my brothers and sisters, we arrive at the end of this story, but not the end of the struggle. For what began at 4 a.m. with 57 trucks has now become a testimony, a living parable of a nation that refused to kneel. Burkina Faso has shown the world that vigilance is the price of freedom, that the eyes which remain open in the night can save millions from bloodshed at dawn, that even when the shadow of the empire moves in silence, the spirit of a united people can rise up and say, "No more." This is not just Ibrahim Traoré news. This is not just Burkina Faso news. This is the cry of Africa's heart, breaking the silence of centuries, declaring that the children of Sankara will not be slaves again. Yes, there was anger when the betrayal was uncovered. Yes, there was sorrow when trusted names were unmasked as traitors. But beyond the anger, beyond the sorrow, there is hope. A hope that rises like the sun over the Sahel, bright, unyielding, unstoppable. Weapons once destined to tear apart families will now build schools where those same families send their children. Grenades meant for destruction will be reborn as irrigation canals to water dry fields. Missiles forged for death will be turned into bells that ring for life. And so we ask you, dear listener, what lesson do you draw from this story? Is it that Africa must forever be on guard? Or is it that unity, courage, and faith can transform even the instruments of death into symbols of hope? If you believe in this awakening, if you stand with Burkina Faso, then join us. Subscribe to this channel, share this story with your friends, leave a comment below, and let your voice be heard. For the struggle is not over. The storms may yet gather, but one truth cannot be denied. The people are awake, the fire has been lit, and Africa will no longer be silent. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And the bell forged from a rifle shall ring, not only in Burkina Faso, but across the whole of Africa, calling a generation to rise, to stand, to believe.